Well, my next guest wrote a new book for young teens. Girls with Goals is about the fascinating rise of women's soccer from its humble beginnings in 19th century Britain to the global phenomenon it is today. And author Clelia Castro-Malaspino of Mercer Island is here with me now. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kelly.
Oh my gosh, so what made you want to write about the history and the impact of women's soccer?
Yeah, well, I grew up in the 90s, which was kind of when soccer took a hold of the suburbs. And I grew up playing. My parents were from Peru and France, countries where soccer was really important. And it was just a sport that had a big presence in my life. I was captain of my high school soccer team. And then during that time, I witnessed the women's soccer really hit a lot of milestones from then to as an adult. The 99 World Cup team, equal pay that just happened a couple years ago. And, when it came time to figure out what I wanted to write about, I thought of this sport and this team that I've admired for so long. And I had thought someone would have written down this history already.
Yeah, you would think.
Yeah, and especially for this audience, but they hadn't. And so I was so happy to be able to dig in and write the history from the beginning to now.
And you mentioned the World Cup, and
Yes.
It's something that you witnessed in person, right? So tell me about that.
Yeah, so I was 16 years old. I was on my soccer team, and I was growing up in New Jersey. So I went to the opening match at Giants Stadium of the 1999 Women's World Cup, which was where Mia Hamm, Brandi Chastain, Washington's own Michelle Akers really made their big debut in the world. And it was a hugely impactful event in my life. It was the first, I was a sports girl, and my big heroes were Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, Ken Griffey Jr., these heroes that were all men. And here were these strong, powerful athletes who were women who wore ponytails and sports bras just like me and my friends. And I was completely starstruck. It was an incredible moment. And that event too celebrated girlhood and femininity in a way that hadn't really been done on that scale before. And it was just amazing. It really made me feel my own power for the first time, like in my life, really.
Oh, I know. And to see like someone that you can see yourself
100%.
in is
Yes.
just means everything.
Absolutely.
When researching too about the history of women's soccer, was there anything that really surprised you through this process?
Oh my gosh, so much. Like, I thought the history of women's soccer started in 1999, but it did not. There was about 100 years before that where women faced so many obstacles. Like starting with, they weren't allowed to play at all, right? And then women's soccer was actually banned for 50 years in the UK and other countries. And in Brazil, it was actually a law on the books that women were not allowed to play soccer. And that was until the 1980s. So
what was the justification for something like that?
That women were too fragile, that we need to protect their reproductive systems, that, and there was also this sense that women were kind of invading this man-only space, and that women kind of belonged at home, raising children, that sort of thing. But it was done as a way to protect women from, this rough and tumble sport.
When was that ban lifted, too?
So the UK ban went from the 20s to the 70s, and the law in Brazil went from the 40s to the 80s. So pretty recent.
It's really mind-blowing when you think about how recent that is. Why do you think the sport is the global powerhouse that it is right now?
It's the women in the sport. They have just so consistently been these incredible inspirations who have pushed the game forward through every single milestone and have not stopped. They've wanted more. They wanted to fight for what they deserve, fight for what they love, and not just for themselves, but for the generations behind them. And the U.S. Women's National Team has done an incredible job of that, especially. They're also incredible to watch, right?
They are.
They win. They're so likable, and it's really contributed to this moment we're in now in women's sports, where it's just kind of like a golden era of women's sports right now. It's been wonderful to watch as a sports fan.
I know, they're having a moment, and we should have so much earlier, but it's exciting to, ride this wave right now. How do you see the future of women's soccer too evolving in the next decade and beyond? Yeah,
I mean, at least in the U.S., we made huge gains. We have this equal pay with the men's team right now on the national team level, but the NWSL, which is the pro league, they have made such gains in the last few years, just from just putting fans in seats, getting coverage on in a big way, so a lot of people get to see the games, and commercial sponsors, things like that. So that's going to continue to grow. There's expansion teams there. Also, fair contribution across the league level and then globally, kind of maybe rising closer to the level that the U.S. is at now. And there's really growth happening in every direction, not just in the sport itself. One of my favorite areas of growth is actually space for the fans. Right here in Seattle, there's a bar called Rough and Tumble Pub in Ballard.
Yes,
and
I'm familiar.
Yes, it's part of this wave of women's sports bars that started about 3 years ago. And it's creating these special spaces for fans to watch women's sports. And that did not exist before 3 years ago. And we're lucky to live in a city that offers such a great version of that. And so even in that direction, spaces for the fans, that's growing, but also, equipment, facilities, just kind of giving women what men have had for a long time.
Amen. And this book, though, is not just for a soccer fan, though, right? I feel like anyone could learn. So touch on that. Yeah.
I mean, if you love, I think the ultimate message of the book is if you love something, fight for that right to do it. And these women over generations, really, they were told no a million different ways, and they still went forth. They've always found a way. They came together, found a way together. So just, if there's something you love, don't listen to the no's, find a way to do it, especially if that's what your heart's calling for. And I also think another thing, what I love about this book, and it was such a joy researching it too, it is so uplifting, right? The world is a complicated place, and the story of women's soccer is one of victory, where women faced all these obstacles, but every single time they were victorious. And that
Amen.
feels good,
yes.
right? And even if you're not a women's sports fan, I recommend on Instagram following some women's sports account like The Gist or Just Women's Sports, because every single day new milestones are reached. There's some amazing thing happening in women's sports, and it just feels good.
Thank you so much.